I truly believe in the power of podcasting. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing this whole channel and this whole podcast in general. And so it's on a regular basis that I reach out to other podcasts that I feel are very interesting or something that I could bring value to. And that's what brings in today's guest, Chris Aggett of the show, The Writing Community Chat Show. By the way, you can catch more details about his podcast over at thewritingcommunitychatshow.com. But why do we have him here today? Well, he's celebrating a huge milestone of over 200 episodes on the Writing Community Chat Show, which is absolutely exemplary because a lot of podcasters sometimes don't even make it past their first few broadcasts before they quit. So this speaks a lot to Chris's perseverance, his resilience, and his resourcefulness. And so I want to kind of pick his brain and talk a little bit more about some of his best guests, also what you could do to land more podcast interviews, and so much more. Let's get to the interview. After 200 episodes of the Writing Community Chat Show, who are your all-time favorite guests? Give me your three best ones.
Oh, straight on the spot there, Dale. Hello, everybody. I'm very much not used to being on this side of the conversation and the questions being aimed at me, but, let's give it a go. I think for me, ultimately, Ian Rankin was an absolute wonderful guest of ours on the Writing Community Chat Show because he is obviously a big target, of the show and the audience. A lot of people know who that man is. And he came on during lockdown and we had a few beers and he kind of had a bit of a laugh with us, and that was what was really fun. And especially because he sent, there's a bit of a section in the show where used to do that, in fact, it's not really a feature anymore, where we would get them to shout out to someone on Twitter that was following the show as a bit of a promotion thing, and we would send them a GIF, an animated GIF. Yeah, so he was like, ultimately he's 60 odd, and he said he didn't understand that, but actually gave away and sent this to a listener, a two-of-a-kind beer mat from the Rebus series that was like 20 years old, and he sent it to them as a gift because he thought I said GIF.
Gift,
gift not
instead of GIF.
Yeah. So it was like one of the biggest guests I'd had on the show, and I didn't mess it up. Yeah. He just misunderstood, but he actually sent it to them as well. And I'm just hoping that person realizes that is kind of a unique thing that he sent. So he was a brilliant episode for that reason. Dale Roberts,
shoot, man.
I've had you on the show, Dale.
There was a good time, actually. We had a blast. I think we filled an entire hour, didn't we?
Yeah, we definitely did. I think, in fact, you've been on at least twice with a panel show as well. And we just had a great time there. And I've got to say, Max Brooks, for me, who is a massive, massive guest to get on the show. I absolutely love the book World War Z. And for me, him coming on, his father's Mel Brooks, who wrote Blazing Saddles. His mum was Anne Bancroft. He's such a massive, massive author. And he was such a humble guy who came on the show and talked and showed machetes and weird weapons that he'd made for research for his new book. So it was just brilliant.
How did you land an interview like that? I mean, because you get so many stinking guests. I think it's pretty awesome that you bring in all walks from the undiscovered indie author to someone that is more celebrity status, like this Brooks author.
I think what's always been apparent on the show, that the community that I've built around it has been quite strong, especially on Twitter. So the indie authors have always been there. It was designed to give them a platform to speak and to show their work off rather than get lost in the analytics of Twitter, which we all do somewhere along the line. But in terms of bookings, obviously through email and through the publisher is where it normally happens. But Max Brooks was a complete lucky strike, really, because we were commenting on one of my posts about who you'd love to see on the show or who would be a great guest, and someone had mentioned Max Brooks, and I had replied, and they had tagged him as well. So I'd replied saying how much I love Max Brooks and World War Z and all of these things, and he replied to that comment, and it went from there. So it was literally a stroke of luck in the Twitter universe, and that was how I landed Max Brooks on the show, which I just can't believe. He actually follows me on my personal account on Twitter when he has got a massive amount of followers and follows like 400 people. I just don't get it, but claim to fame for me, that is.
Then again, there's something so unique about your show, because I know when I came on, this was when Chris was still co-hosting with you. You guys crack open a couple cold ones. You have yourself some beers
definitely.
And such. And I think that for some reason, it really lends itself to just a really light atmosphere. I can just only imagine this man pulling out machetes and weapons and such like that as you guys are throwing back some beer.
Yeah, I mean, it's always been a chat show, and that's really something that I want to put forward.
Yeah.
I try to make it less like an interview as possible, because no one likes an interview, really, do they? I mean, you want to kind of sit down like we are and have a good conversation and just talk. And that's what ultimately, especially through lockdown, is what people were missing. It's just the interaction of human interaction, where a lot of people couldn't get that. So to be able to come on a show and actually sit there with a drink and talk about their life story, because ultimately that's what I do with a guest, rather than just talk about what they've written now. I always go through their history and then lead up to what they're working on and what their projects are. So it's a really good thing to do, because a lot of these guests, especially the more celebrity style guests, I don't think they often get talked about the original story or the origins of where they come from. It's often about the new thing or the big thing. So suddenly when they sit there and they're kind of relaxing, and then you jump into where did this all start and how did you feel when you kind of messed it up out of university or something and you were rejected, and talk about that rather than talk about how their book is now on Netflix, I think that really takes them back and relaxes them, and suddenly they're telling you things about their family that they didn't realize. I think Max Brooks was a great example. When we go back to that show, he talks about how his mother, who was a massive Oscar-winning actress back in the day, she used to come home and read him. He had really bad dyslexia and struggled with all these things. She taught him how to type, and she used to read him stories. And when she used to go away for filming, she used to record it on audiobook, or record it on a tape for him to play for when he was going to sleep, so he didn't miss the storytelling. But back then, it wasn't audiobooks back then. She kind of invented that. So I think that's just absolutely wonderful. And that story came from digging into his past. And it's a nice thing to do, and to hear the real person coming through as well.
It's funny. I think that the best way to describe the writing community chat show, it reminds me a little bit of Hot Ones for authors. Instead of hot wings, you guys are typically, you got the beer out and such. And I think that that's just a fun atmosphere. I think I ended up getting water because unfortunately you don't need me schnockered on your show.
I think the fun thing is a massive amount of my audience, weirdly, is American. And I've had a lot of American guests on the show. And for them, my time at 8 o'clock in the afternoon or the evening when I start the show generally is 4 p.m. for them, 4 p.m.
Yeah.
And what I really love is some of the hardcore fans that have been there since day one. When they chat to me on the show in the live chat, they're saying like they snuck out from work to watch some of the show. And I think that is absolutely mind-blowing. The fact that they would risk, I don't know, getting caught by coming to listen to the show live and or watching it live on YouTube. And I think it's just a wonderful thing to hear that. And the dedicated fans there. So after 200 episodes, I just say to them, thank you so much, because it's all about them. It wouldn't be here otherwise.
It's really cool that you guys identify so much with your audience and that you connect with them on a more personal level. And I think it speaks to the content that you're putting out. It's pretty amazing, and how well researched you are when you're going into it, because it does feel like a loose conversation. And when you ask questions, it's not these surface level things like, well, what got you into writing, or what did you think about this, like some close-ended questions. I think you guys are really good at doing that. I keep saying you guys, now it's just a one-man show. In fact, let's walk back to when you first started the writing community chat show. What were your original plans, and have they changed much since?
That was a long time ago. It really wasn't that long ago. I mean, it's just over 2 years, but it feels like a world ago. My journey is kind of a strange one, because I got into writing after my granddad passed away, and when I was at his funeral, when they talk about someone who's got a life that was just kind of full of achievement, and you sit there thinking, damn, I've done a bit, but I need to do more here. And that's when I kind of discovered you, Dale, on YouTube, looking at how to self-publish this book that I had an idea about. Weirdly, because I was never really into writing, so it just happened. And it's a really strange thing to say when a lot of the people I have on the show, or people probably you've spoken to, always dreamt about being a writer, or always wanted to do this and that, and I just kind of stumbled into it. And quite literally, during the battle of self-promotion on Twitter, other social platforms, this is when I talked about the analytics of Twitter being lost in there. This is literally when I thought, wouldn't it be great to have a podcast so that voice could be found and people could tune in and listen to you talk about your book, and you can promote it that way rather than tweeting responses to writers' lifts, which happen everywhere, that generally people probably don't even look at. So that idea was manifested from nowhere. And some of the people that were really helping me on Twitter at the time was Chris Hooley, who was co-host with me, and in fact a lady called Sol as well. So 3 of us started the show, and I just reached out to them, and those 2 people, specifically those 2. So I messaged them and said, look, I've got this idea. What do you think? And instantly they both said, yeah, let's do it. And it was taken down, but initially there was a 2.5 hour podcast episode of us ranting, which was the first episode, and it was hilarious. It was so painful to listen to. But that's what it was. It was just an audio voice show, and it was just 3 of us chatting absolute nonsense with a bit of book stuff thrown in the middle of it. But it grew and developed into a chat show, so that's where it started.
That's awesome. So it's now just you at this point, right?
It's just Chris, yeah.
One-man show, dude. How are you managing doing that, being a writer and, of course, being a podcaster, and not to mention you're not just doing audio podcasts, you're doing video podcast, and then I'm sure you've got other work that you got to do outside of that stuff and family life.
Oh, of course. All of those things. I think, I can't remember if this was Adele Parks or Sarah Pinborough, shameful clanging about guests they've had on the show. One of them said about they were working full-time, a mother of 3, and said if people haven't got time, they say they haven't got time to write, then basically, screw them. It's, you make time. And I have done that, but you've got to realize, and I've always, said this in terms of writing, whether you're writing or whether you're podcasting, it really is a family effort. So your family, your friends, you sacrifice time you have with them to be able to do this and create. And for me, I find it a pleasure. I really enjoy creating, making visuals and thumbnails and promoting. And I love interviewing and chatting to people. So for me, it's kind of a win. For them, obviously, they've got to occupy their time elsewhere. So for what I do generally in work, I have to then schedule everything else around this. And you probably know there are ways of scheduling social media posts and things for a certain time, but that's not really what I do. So I kind of just dedicate a lot of my time, even when I'm kind of sat in the house watching telly, I might just be on my phone and sending a post here and there. So it really is kind of a full-time thing. And hopefully one day it will become a full-time thing where all of my attention is on this rather than things outside of this as well. And I don't mean family-wise, I mean, kind of work.
Yeah, that totally makes sense for sure. It's so amazing to see your growth because, I know over on the YouTube channel, you guys are going to, we're just going to stick with you guys for now. We know it's
Yes,
singular. We're just going to call it you guys. But
Yeah.
you're almost ready to hit 1,000 subscribers, and you're getting ready to hit the YouTube partner program. So I believe you're on to something. And this is what I've said about your podcast. It was a lot of fun. It was probably one of the most fun podcasts I've done. And I've done dozens. So as a show host, though, I think you could probably relate to this somewhat here. You probably get a lot of authors vying for a spot on a panel on your show or in a one-on-one interview. What are some do's and don'ts for authors looking to land an interview on a podcast?
Wow, that's a good question. And I was about to say that there are no don'ts, but there probably is. I mean, recently someone applied through email, which is absolutely fine. I encourage people to send emails through. And you can find that on the website, or I'll tell you about it on social media, whatever. They said, here's links to my this, and this. So I clicked on the Twitter link, it took me to Facebook. I clicked on something else, took me somewhere else. And kind of these things. And I kind of felt like that was perhaps lazy self-promotion.
Yeah.
So for me, that was the only kind of turn off I've ever had in terms of guest requests. But I think absolutely do request. Possibly because it's live. Many people might feel that they don't want to do it. I think there are plenty of guests that have been on my show who the classic writer type of shy recluse in that way. who have come on the show and really enjoyed themselves. So I would suggest, don't hold back. If you want to come on the show, just send an email, or you can go on the website and under the shows, there's actually a Google form you can fill out. But just send through who you are, why you think you'd be good on the show, and a link to your socials, and I'll check you out. This is as simple as that.
Do you find that, are you okay if you ever get like an email that seems like it's 3 pages long, or do you prefer something that's brief and gets right to the point?
I like brief, but I also don't like laziness.
Like so copy paste.
Yeah. I mean, the classic on Twitter, people reply to a competition or something like that with a link, and then they tweet below without any context. I think, put a bit of effort in. But generally, it's fine. If you want to say something quite, if you want to tell a story, that's absolutely brilliant. I think that's one thing I love on the show, is telling a person's story. So if there are things you've done in your life that I think the audience would love, you've got a good shout there.
Nice. These are great tips, and I'm hoping that some people will take advantage of this. Do you still actively look for guests for the show?
Yeah, I think I'm normally booked up about 2 months in advance through, as mentioned, this use Calendly. So I'll have a couple of shows lined up and slots available. So if I think that person sent through a good story and they've got good, not necessarily good following, because like I said, I really do encourage the indie author to come on the show as well, because I love telling their stories. And quite often you might have someone on, rewind it back to season 1, audio podcast only. Noel Clark came on the show, who was an absolute massive actor at the time. There are things that's happened since, whether or not those things are true, I don't know. But that guest had 250,000 followers on Twitter, and he retweeted that, and the engagement, let's be honest, wasn't really good. But you get an indie author on that's got 500 followers that engage with that person, and they get much more engagement than someone who's a celebrity. So, it's not really about who you are in terms of stature. If you've got a good story, whether you're a celebrity or an indie author, even if... I would have forgot her name now. I had a 14-year-old author on the show once. Mm-hmm. She blew my mind in terms of intellect. I couldn't keep up. She was so clever, it freaked me out. And not often do I get freaked out in an interview. I was actually sweating, thinking, she's going to ask me something I can't answer here.
Right.
So it really doesn't matter. I look for a good personality, so, just get it in there and send a request. I'll have a look at it.
Nice. What's one major tip that you've gleaned from these authors that you've interviewed over the years? From all walks, of course. Like, what's one thing that you're like, that's awesome?
I think what's been a very surprising comment from most of the established authors is that they all kind of feel the same way, and that way is that they feel like they're going to get caught out. And I'm quoting that is because that's what a lot of them have said. So they feel exactly the same as the indie author does. They've put their work out there. They have the same doubts. They have the same fears that, people are not going to enjoy that work. But they do. And they stay and they get re-signed and things like this. So the big tip in that is to actually go for it. And fake it till you make it almost. But just believe in yourself enough to stick that work out there. And if you like it, you almost guaranteed someone else is going to like it. So basically, just believe in what you're doing.
That's awesome. I love that tip. Have you ever noticed any knock-on effects in your writing business from running an audio and video podcast?
Knock-on effects is in...
have you seen any like additional sales, additional traffic to your author sites, things like that?
I would say that I keep them kind of separated in a little way. Mm-hmm. But what I will say is that... people who have listened to the show will know I've talked about this quite a few times, where I think your image on social media is a much more valuable promotion tool than just plug in your book. So for example, I've had a few sales from the community that I feel are a community of friends to me rather than fans of the show, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So people have bought my book as the result of that. And I think that we've all discovered, and we've all shared this because we're all there to help each other, that if you kind of have a good conversation with someone for a few weeks and they notice you've got a book and you've shared it, they're much more likely to click on that link and buy that book because they've invested in your person rather than here's a book, buy it. People like to buy stuff, but you don't always want to go and say, buy this, buy this, buy this, because it'll put you off. So sell your personality. Don't sell it, just be a personality, and people will respond to you, and then they'll buy your book from that, I think. So
That's really
kind
cool.
of.
You've been dropping some serious 411. I want to wrap up today's podcast with actually one more piece of advice that you would give to aspiring authors and self-publishers out there without repeating yourself.
Okay, I think if you are looking to start self-publishing, I think that definitely slow down and take the steps forward carefully. For me, I kind of rushed into this, and I used some brilliant videos like Dale's self-publishing videos and Chandler Bolt's self-publishing school. These kind of things on YouTube were a massive help for me, so definitely lean on those. But the one valuable thing I learned, I did everything for free, thanks to videos like Dale, where I got my ISBNs from Amazon, for example, and I took all the steps forward myself. Financial situation, the confidence probably not to go and seek out these things as well. That they were the reasons why I did it for free. And what happened was I created something I loved. I was very eager, and I put that out there. And now they've had fantastic reviews and feedback. They've also had a very slight criticism in grammar, the first book anyway. And that was the sacrifice of doing it for free. So what I'd say is, if you really want to send this out, and you've done it for free, which is absolutely fine and a fantastic thing to do, because let's be honest, trying to make money back off spending hundreds or thousands on cover designs, things like this, is a hard task. You don't really want to start off that way. So if you're doing it for free, take the extra steps and time to ensure that proofreading, the grammar's good, even if you have to go through friends or maybe favors from friends and family or editors, rather than spending out hundreds and thousands. I think just take your time and make sure it's right before you do publish it.
Big thank you over to Chris. I appreciate you taking some time out your day to drop some 411 for us. Folks, go over, take a look at his podcast at the Writing Community Chatshow.com. Tell him Dale sent you. Till later, this has been Self-Publishing with Dale, and I'll catch you in next week's interview.